Blew all kinds of deadlines this weekend. But what can I say? We had quality time last night looking at the episode called Hope on Blackish on Demand. And then we all just fell asleep afterwards. And here we are. I'm going to talk about the Lumpenproletariat. Years ago, back in my activist days, one of my elders uttered a term that I had never heard before, even though it was Marxist jargon. The term was Lumpenproletariat, and she said it in passing to some people at a gathering we attended. After the gathering, I asked her what the hell the term meant. She said that the Lumpenproletariat are the layer of the working class that mainly consists of the non-working poor, rather the lowest of the low, quote unquote, the untrained, the uneducated, and the unhirable layer of the working class. The theory from the Marxist left is that the lumpen's roots are traced back to the landless peasants and farmers, and land-owning peasants were forced or tricked off their land and into the cities and into the factories during the rise of the capitalist class. The landless peasants were to either work as well, but realized that they would join the unemployed poor that were already in the cities. Brought up in the black community, I knew exactly what my elder was saying without the long communist history lesson and Marxist dogma attached. Of course, we would be talking about the criminal element, or rather the poor forced into crime as defined by the rulers and the state to survive and eat. So there you have it, the lumpen. Now, why do I bring up the lumpen? I do because the subject matter has struck me as interesting this past month. You see, the lumpen, when they are interjected in the mainstream political sphere and the political activist sphere, can be either an ally or an enemy. They can become the next Assata Shakur, Malcolm X, or Fred Hampton, or they could be a betrayer of the revolution, like a Joseph Stalin or an Eldridge Cleaver, or a street corner / radical pimp / drug dealer. In other words, the so-called conscious thug. You may have heard the term. They might have found themselves in trouble and become institutionalized in the penal system. There, they can become politicized in the cell, and coming out, depending on the individual, they might embrace politics. Their experience might drive them to see that the root cause of why they were poor and committed crimes, and as a result, to be locked up in the first place, is a system of oppression, a class system aimed at warehousing the poor. So, they might fall into 3 different categories. Again, this depends on the individual. Category 1 is the person who has gained knowledge of what happened to them and will try to be straight after their incarceration and will go on to live a life where they will never be in jail again. They might not even be political at all. Category 2 will have a full conscious understanding of their life and why they are poor and will seek to dismantle the system that put them in jail or the criminal world to begin with. Think Fred Hampton and Assata Shakur. And as a side note, please feel free to add in any of your own heroines or heroes who fit this bill if you are not black or if you are a woman of any nationality or an LGBT person. Also, I need to stop here and make it clear that the lumpen does not always have to be an ex-prisoner. In fact, an example of what I'm about to present is a young man who was never in prison, but was definitely part of the lumpen layer. Category 3 might appear to look like Category 2, but somewhere their instincts to be on the hustle will later kick in. They will eventually look out for number 1, and ironically, to see the system as unbreakable, if anything, workable, because an alternative society and an alternative process for social change would seem unrealistic and not very fruitful. They will find themselves in action, siding with the ruling class and the state. So, if there is the possibility of a privileged person who is involved in political circles becoming a betrayer of any revolutionary attempts at making change, so too can someone on the bottom of our class system. So I want to talk about Sabu, also known as Hector Xavier Monsegur. I know I'm not pronouncing it correctly. Sabu had helped to found the group LulzSeg, They were an organization of hackers that were affiliated with Occupy Wall Street. Also, he worked with a man known as Jeremy Hammond. And they wanted to hack Stratfor, a geopolitical intelligence and consulting firm. Now, Hector was arrested on June 7th, 2011, after the FBI raided his New York home for previous hacking charges, including conspiracy to commit access device fraud, conspiracy to commit bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft. He originally faced up to 124 years in prison for those charges, but the FBI propositioned him with an offer to become an informant and continue as his alter ego as Sabu and help them catch the rest of the Lulzsec group. Sabu agreed and only served 7 months in prison when initially arrested. Now, Sabu lived in a project in Lower Manhattan. Sabu has never really had a job. He sold drugs on the side as well. And you have to understand his arrest with the FBI happened in the summer. And so therefore OWS began in September. Autonomist group and various other little hacking groups that were political, working in alliance with OWS, began their work around September. And so therefore they were already compromised with the likes of Sabu, and I'm pretty sure a bunch of privileged boys as well, who probably were also snitches. So I just wanted to throw that out as an example of how a lumpen can betray a movement. Now, don't get this twisted. And I have a particular thing about this guy because, here was somebody who taught himself a great skill set. He came from the bottom as someone like myself and other people who taught themselves technology and IT, but did not come from any kind of formal background. It just sucks that he did what he had done. So how is this possible? How can a lumpen become a betrayer of revolution? Again, I want to be very, very clear. It does not always happen this way. They are not always all betrayers, any more than upper class privileged people can always be betrayers of movements and the political process, revolutionary change, or even reformist change in the radical vein. I can only offer why this happens based on this conjecture. I believe that while capitalism has made the educated middle-class suburban dweller its handmaiden and defender in order to preserve itself, by design, people who have never had anything but desiring all that is presented to them on a daily basis as a promise of a better life, luxury cars, McMansions, gold-plated flat-screen TVs, will believe that one day, if given the chance, they can have those things too. It answers to why some people who live in the projects will wear as much gold as they can't really afford, and they will name their children after luxury products. It is more real to them to believe in a materialism they might not ever have than a just and classless society where everyone can have everything they want and be what they want to be, other than a rich ruler who values luxury and exploitation over humanity. And so this is by design as well. For coming from the very bottom of a classist society, the rulers might find their most vicious shock troop as their defenders in the lumpen, because the lumpen, even offered lies as a reward of riches, will be just happy enough to have the lights on and 3 squares a day, just like the institution of prison. This is the Garage Autonomist.